Hey everybody. So it's about to be thru hiking season here, and I've been getting a lot of questions about all aspects of thru hiking from different levels of hikers and people that are doing their first thru hike, or people that are doing a thru hike on a trail they've never been on before. And so I figured I would start a series here, basically kind of like an Ask a Thru Hiker series to try to answer the most common of these questions. So today I'm going to be focusing on how much does it cost to thru hike. I get this all the time and you might be surprised. It's actually not too bad. It's certainly a lot cheaper than normal life can be. So, to start here, I will say that this is a highly variable thing. So, I'm going to try to give you an estimate, but I mean, it really depends on your personal choices, both off trail and on trail. The biggest hurdle for a lot of people is gear. And I would say if you don't have gear, you're going to have to get gear, obviously. If you do have gear, and you have appropriate gear, then you're good to go. You cannot even worry about this cost. But if you kind of need to upgrade some things, or you have some really heavy gear that you probably shouldn't thru hike with, it's going to be more cost for you. But I'm going to separate the cost of thru hiking and the cost of your initial gear purchase because that can kind of throw things off a bit. So I will give you an idea here though. For your initial gear, I would say you'll spend, if you're starting from absolute zero, you're not going to need to spend more than $1,000 to get your base gear and what you need to thru hike with. And you can do it for a lot cheaper than that. If you take time, you can find used gear. You can browse the internet for gear swaps, stuff like that, or just wait for sales to pop up. And you don't have to have the latest and greatest. I've seen people thru hike with gear from the 60s, and I've seen people thru hike with the latest ultralight gear, and both of them did fine. Ultimately, I think you should go lightweight because it's better for your body, it's better for your mind, and it's just more fun. You'll have more fun out there. But don't break the bank doing it. Just before I get into it here, I want to say don't let your budget keep you from thru hiking. I've seen a lot of, and don't let what my estimations are scare you off or intimidate you. I've seen people hike on really limited amounts of money, and you can do that. It's hard, and you have to really plan out and try to get the cheapest food you can and use hiker boxes. Hopefully they're full when you pass through, stuff like that. But it's possible to hike for very cheap. That said, this is what it normally costs me to hike, and this is kind of what I would think is an average for most people on trail. So let's get into it. Before I get into the actual breakdown of cost, I want to get into kind of the three main variables that affect the how much it costs to thru hike, and that is location. So the big thing is which trail you're on and what towns you pass through. So obviously for me the AT was a lot cheaper because you're going through more commercial towns, kind of just small residential towns that have cheaper stores, cheaper restaurants. So you're going to be finding Walmarts and Food Lions, and when you eat in town you'll find buffets. And that will save you a lot of money, whereas on the PCT and CDT, you do go through small towns, but they tend to be a higher cost of living or touristy towns, and so you end up spending a little more money for food and for both resupply and for restaurant food in the end, and that's going to cost a little more. So your location, which trail you're hiking, can be a variable. And the next variable is the time you spend in town. So obviously if you spend more time at hotels and restaurants eating, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. And so it's just something you have to watch out for. If you're really on a budget, you should probably try to spend as little time in town as possible because restaurants suck a lot of your money in, as do hotels when you're feeling down. So town time. And the final variable is trail time. So this all depends on your kind of pace and how long you want to take to do the trail, but it can vary from person to person. I would say on average, from most people I've seen, it takes someone about 5 to 6 months to thru hike a trail. And so the longer you're out there, obviously, the more you're going to be spending on food and the more you're going to be going into town. And so that can really add up. And that's kind of the three main things that are going to affect how much your thru hike costs, the big variables, I guess you might say. So now let's go ahead and break it down. I'm just going to give you a quick little rundown of how much it might cost to thru hike, and this is all based on my experience and just kind of some averages I've come up with. So it's not precise, but it'll give you a good idea of where your money's going and how much you'll need. So to start off, let's keep it simple with shoes. A lot of people don't think about shoes, but you're going to need about 3 pairs of shoes per thru hike. So 3 pairs times an average of about $100 is what I've found. Yeah, you can get some for 80, and these are mostly trail runners. So if you're getting real hiking boots, which I wouldn't recommend, I always recommend trail runners, but if you are, it's going to be higher than that. So it's just an average. 3 pairs of shoes, that turns out to be about $300. Now the next big variable on trail is kind of gear malfunctions, having to replace a piece of gear, or let's say the weather changes and you need a new beanie or you need better socks, something like that. And this happens on every thru hike. There's always gear that you're going to need or gear that you're going to have to repair. And it's hard to say exactly what it's going to be. It changes every time. I like to have a buffer maybe of around $300. So if you watched my CDT videos, you know there were times where I had to kind of get some more gear for the snow that was coming in, micro spikes, an ice axe, stuff like that. And that was covered by this budget. Actually, on the CDT, it was higher than 300, but we'll just call it for now about 300, just in case you need more gear or you have to replace gear. And now's where it gets a little more interesting. So, trail time. On average, most people spend about 5 to 6 months, and that is 150 to 180 days on trail. I'm going to go with 180 because even if you spend about 5 months on trail, you're going to spend some extra time getting to and from the trail and getting home. So it's just safer to go with a higher number. So 180 days. And for me, I spend about, I'd say $40 on average when I resupply, and that's for about 5 days. So $40 per 5 days. This is not adding up math-wise, but basically what we're going to do is divide 180 by 5 and then multiply that by 40. So that comes out to be $1,440. Let's just ignore that equation there. 180 days, $40 for every 5 days. And so yeah, that's about what it's going to cost for your food on trail, for your actual trail food. Now the next thing, and this is where it gets really variable, is how much money you're spending in town. So for these trails, on average, there's about 28 town stops per person. I mean, you can stop more on the AT if you want, but most people stop around 28 times. And for town food, when I'm in town and when most people I've observed are in town, we normally eat about 2 meals. One when you go in and one before you head out. And obviously if you stay in town overnight, that number goes up. So, but let's just call it 2 meals per town stop times about $12 per meal. That's kind of an average, although it's on the lower end for sure. So 28 times 24 is $1,344 for restaurant meals. And that's, I would honestly say that's pretty much on the low end. I know I spend more than that in town, and it's hard not to. That's a big place to spend money because you come into town, you're starving, you just want to gorge on food, and it's hard to resist that. Now, as far as staying in town goes, sometimes you can stay in a hostel, sometimes you can split a hotel room with friends. So, and you don't always stay in town. Some people never stay in town, although that is also hard to do. So 28 town stops. I've come up with a kind of arbitrary number, and it's based on not staying in town and staying in town, and it creates an average of about $20 per town stop as far as lodging goes. And so that equates to about 560. Whoops. $560. So, and this is a very modest estimate. It's kind of playing it safe, assuming you're not going to spend too much on food and lodging. But all told, this equates to $3,944. And that kind of lines up with my estimates. I always say kind of 4,000 minimum to hike. That's what you should save up. But what I would recommend is saving $6,000 for a thru hike. So the rationale behind this number is fairly simple. Just like life, you never really know what's going to happen, and you have to be prepared for it. So if you get injured and you need to spend time in town off trail to heal up, or maybe you just really like food and you end up eating a lot more than you expected, you need to be prepared for that, and that's why I recommend 6,000. It's a good number. I've never found that I've gone over it, but I have found that I've come close to that. Well, hopefully this answered any questions you might have about how much it costs to thru hike, but if not, leave any questions you have in the comments and I'll get back to you. And since this is the first video in the Ask a Thru Hiker series, if you have any more questions about thru hiking, just leave them in the comments and maybe you'll see a video answer on that topic in the future. And if not, you'll at least get an answer in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and if you've enjoyed it, you can head over to my Patreon page down there and help support content like this and keep me creating it. And actually, a cool thing is we're getting close to my goal of eliminating ads from my website, so with a few more pledges, maybe we can get there. See you next time.